What is up, guys? Don't forget to subscribe. Check out my channel playlist for individual tutorials on logic, sculpting, animation, music, and more. What we're going to do is look at my levels, then I'm going to decipher, break down how I create levels. We'll have 3 different levels. We'll have Linger, my 2D game, a Sonic game, and my game Polybius, which is a first-person shooter. That's the one we're going to look at first because I think that's the one we can learn from the most. Whenever creating a level, you shouldn't pick your music first because you don't want to make your atmosphere around something, a sound that you pick beforehand. It's easier to pick the music afterwards, in my opinion. In making music sound crisp, what you want to do is use EQ. With EQ, you can make your voice sound tinny, and you can also make it sound natural, or you can make it sound like you're talking over a phone. The way you make it sound natural, so you have this right here. There's 3 dots or 4 dots within this EQ within Dreams, Equalizer. You can find it in the tweak menu. The left side, that's your low voices. The right side, that's your high voices. Turn that down if your voice sounds tinny. And if your voice is too deep, turn down the lows. If you want to raise something, you can raise it. And this also makes your voice louder. That's how EQ works. Reverb and delay, if you're in a hallway, make it to where there's more delay or reverb. Pretty essential, pretty basic stuff. Then look up music that bases around your level after you're done creating. That way you're not limiting your creation process while you're creating the level, because basing your level around music before you've actually created it can actually limit what you can create with it sounding right or acceptable for the level. So let's go ahead and start this. What I want you guys to remember is foreground, background, and focal points. That is how you create levels. So right here, essentially, this is an example of focal points. A focal point is pretty much what your eye is drawn to the most. So imagine that as a dot where the 2 pillars are. Imagine this dot right here, and then there is 2 lines on the side that are sort of diagonal like that. That is essentially what a focal point is. Using focal points, you can actually make games feel more tight and more linear, as you'll know where to go. That's pretty much the definition of making a game tight. You can also use lights in order to make a game feel tighter. Lights can be used for paths, and that's how you can tighten your gameplay in Dreams PS4. Such as the key here, pretty tight gameplay, pretty simple to get here. There's also a thing called loose gameplay. You'll have to know when to use loose gameplay and tight gameplay for your games. Both of them can be essential, and you don't want loose gameplay for your controls, and that is pretty essential, getting down everything. You want things to look beautiful. What I did here is actually created boxes. So we're actually inside of a box here, but this box is pretty detailed in each part of these rooms because rooms are boxes. The texture is the iron that you see there, the rusted iron, and pretty much I covered that over the box to create the room. Then I tried to make it resemble life as much as possible, make it as realistic as possible by adding other elements and assets to the dream, like bookshelves, torches, sculptures, real sculptures, pillars, and I really just wanted to make it to where the room felt more like a room. Doors, all that great stuff, notes to add to the story, make it to where people are more invested in the story. Not like, an arcade game where you're just like, shooting and doing that. Those can be fun too. Mobile games can be fun. Those are more linear games without story. But for someone to get invested and want to really play a game and have fun with it and waste their time with it, you want them to be able to invest in characters, and that's pretty much character development. You can look up my character development video if you want to. The notes that I'm using is how I'm helping the game develop a character and the other scenes within the game where the main bad guy and all these other things. So you want the elements to match your atmosphere, and you want your atmosphere to match your music, and you want it all to sound right for the appropriate parts of the game. And as you can see, the torches make the game more tight, the lights make the game more tight, to where the player really does easily know where to go. And they follow this path subconsciously without even knowing it. As you can see, I just went straight to the thing. Now there's parts of my game like this, just really, it's not even parts, it's just this room where it's really open. I don't recommend doing that, but you can do that. There's a reason why I did that, and that's an example of looseness. Like this darkness here, not knowing where to go, this is really loose gameplay, but it's okay because in this room there's really only one objective, so I wouldn't put too many objectives in one room, if that makes sense. I would put just enough to where it feels right. Again, to where it feels right. That's the key word. You can put as much as you want as long as it feels right. Dreams is also apparently going to be adding textures at some point, or at least could be. The reason we don't have textures now is because they don't want every dream to look the same. Essentially, a texture would be this, to where you don't have to manually do it, put the rusted iron onto the thing, and so on. So I really tried to nail this atmosphere here, and I hope you guys are enjoying the tutorial so far. I didn't want every room to look the same. I wanted everything to have its own unique feel. To make the game's aesthetic more apparent, you can also use things like religious themes. I don't recommend using blood, but you can also do that. To make the game feel more like if it's a horror genre, you can do things like that. I would try also doing your own unique things that people have never seen before, if you can come up with that. So that's just throwing that out there. Let's go ahead and look at the actual game. Now that we understand focal points. I haven't really talked about foreground and background because I'm going to do that more for the 2D games that I have in place for this tutorial, if that makes sense. But I have talked about using assets, other people's assets, and covering up your rooms, and adding things in here to make it feel as much like real life as possible, like floorboards. You don't want to like make a floor and then it not having anything supporting it, like the support beams. You really want to add those support beams in there. You want to make it resemble as real life as much as you possibly can. So you might be surprised at what this actually looks like. Let's go ahead and turn on the lights real quick. As you can see, this is actually, we are inside of boxes. We are actually inside of boxes. And the perimeters of the boxes are actually covered with the iron steel, such as giving us the texture that we want for our game. If you weren't working with rooms, you could still look at it as a box, because here we actually see a box for our open world game. So imagine trees like Skyrim. We would have the trees on the outside perimeter instead of on the inside of the box. That's pretty much how that would work. What you can do is turn on your floor setting and then decipher where you want things to go within the grid, depending on how big your game is going to be. Now, you can't make open world games in Dreams, but you can use the grid. There may be some kind of mathematical equation to figure out the perfect amount of stuff you should have within one area of the grid, but it's pretty easy to actually kind of get it whenever you get the feel of it. What I mean is, if it doesn't feel like a forest, then that means you have to do some more stuff to it, if that makes sense. Like add more trees, make it more vast, make it as vast as possible, while applying what I've taught you here with my rooms. What you would want to do is make it as realistic as possible. You want the birds, you want the rocks, you want the ground, you want the right color, you want the sky, you'll want the trees, you want the bark on the trees, you'll want the tent, you want the fire, the campfire, you'll want the cave, you'll want the you'll just pretty much be going down the list of things that you'll want until finally it's filled up enough, and then you'll want it placed in the right areas to where it's searchable. You can search stuff, and then you want it to make sure that things are spread out enough to where the level actually appears bigger than what it is. That's what I would do there, while remembering that the outside perimeters is essentially just trees and a boundary. just like the boundary that we have inside of the rooms that I have within my game. So it's essentially the same concept. It's just not as bounded as a room. You have much more to work with. You have much more to put inside of your canvas. It may take a little bit more time to do that kind of thing than it is to make a room, but it's also essentially really cool once you get the full fleshed out thing. You just can't forget the objects that you need for it to feel real. You want to imitate real life as much as possible, and you also want to make it to where the proper sounds happen whenever your object interacts with things, such as if you were to step on a puddle, you want the sound of water to actually have those water footsteps instead of the regular sound effects. You want the grass sound effects whenever you step on grass. You don't want to forget any of these kind of things, because this will make the game feel more realistic than what it is, and that will help people be able to dive down in and forget that they're playing a dream. And I feel like that's something that people may forget that they want people to do, because if you can forget that you're playing dreams, that means you'll be more invested into the dream, and that means people will play it longer, and that means word of mouth will spread your dream essentially forward. Again, you want to use lights to make your game more linear, more tight. Linear and tight are the same things. You don't want your game to be too loose within the game, because loose would be like, we're just like, moving, not knowing where to go. But linear, light, stuff like that can give us a path without us having to carve it in on the floor to where the player just instantly knows where to go. Now let's talk about 2D games. I'll go ahead and start with my Sonic game. And then I'll talk about Linger, and this is where we're going to talk about the foreground and background stuff and all the essentials to it. So right there we have a background and a foreground, and we also have a center ground. I'm not sure, I kind of forgot what that's called. But as you can see, using all this and having the proper assets can make the game feel more complete and more full. I actually do feel like I'm playing a Sonic type game, and I created this. And we even have a sun in the background, which also gives off to the flair of the game. We have music playing also, and that really does also help. Undertale really didn't have the best of graphics, but because of its music, it allowed people to dive into the game, which is a great example of why music is important for games. Halloween was actually not accepted until they added music to the movie. The Halloween movie was actually not accepted. The original script, the original film, all of it was rejected until they added the music. Then the person was like, oh wait, this is actually scary, I'm sorry. So remember that music can play a role, and it's really easy to find other people's music to put in your game. There's no reason why you can't put a great amount of effort into music into your game. With a Sonic game, it's really easy to see what's linear. You just move to the right, and that's pretty much it, and it's pretty simple. Backgrounds, foregrounds, middle grounds, and that's pretty much what you want in a game like this. You want that aesthetic, you want that feel. This was the second dream that I created. Linger was the first dream that I created. I really wanted to figure out all the aspects of different types of games that you can create in dreams. That was important to me because I kind of wanted to know how to actually design all of these things to where I could know what to do to make my dream as well fit as possible. At the top, you might be able to see tutorials that I've created, such as my fighting game tutorial, my how to comb hair in dreams tutorial, my how to remix characters tutorial, my how to remix games tutorial. You can check all these out by checking out my channel playlist. Let's go ahead to, or clicking on it up there, and if it said I'll stream it over here, feel free to come into the stream. Let's go ahead and take a look at my game, Linger. I want to take a look at the boss battle, the classic RPG aspects of my boss battle. Not the actual game, or the inside part of the game though. So right here we have a foreground, middle ground, and a, the front part being our main character, focal point being our enemy, and background being the rocks, and the river being the center. So we can really see what's going on. Dragon Quest does this a lot, so you can take what you want from this and apply it to your classic RPGs if you make classic RPGs. Linger is a game that's actually a multi-RPG. You fight like Hollow Knight, and then you have the ability to go into a world where you can fight the harder bosses and enemies like this, and so on. Don't forget storytelling in your game. Storytelling is a great way to get people more invested. Storytelling is how people are going to play your game longer. They don't want to play something that feels flat. They want to play something that feels unique and feels fleshed out with a story. Unless what you're going for is a mini game, of course, which people do play mobile games a lot. All you have to do is look up, search tutorials on how to actually make games more fun, more how to make a mobile game correctly. You can look this stuff either up on Google or on YouTube. Just make sure you go to sites that are trustworthy if you do it. And make sure you look up other people's tutorials that are dreams on YouTube as well as mine. So right there we have a linear path going on. We have a few enemies, and this is pretty much the gist of the outside part of the game. I haven't finished up the game. There's a few things that I have to fix with the character. Really, I don't know how that glitch even happened, but you know, it's pretty easy to fix, because how I was going to fix that was just replace the main character with an old model that I had created where the glitch didn't happen. So as you can see, we have background, foreground, and middle ground, if that's even what middle ground is called. But you might be surprised at what a 2D game is actually looking like in Dreams, and I'll show you what I mean. It's pretty easy to figure out a 2D game. The tight gameplay is pretty linear. I'd say that's the best thing about 2D games, is that everything's already linear for you. But there are a few illusions that you can use for games. There's an art to making illusions in Dreams, and what I mean is we're actually not inside of a cave. We just created the outer perimeters of a cave. So you can remember that whenever you're creating Dreams also. You're just giving the illusion of things and then using the camera to pretty much get that stuff down. And there's always an endpoint that you want people to be able to find pretty easily, not too hard. And then there's always a beginning point, and that's pretty much how you make tight gameplay, as well as with the controls. You don't want too many controls, you want just enough, and I would argue that you want things simple as you possibly can make them, because that's the love of mobile games. That's why people like mobile games, because it's not too hard to get them. Whenever things are over complicated, it can actually overwhelm the player, and that is something that you don't want to go for either, unless of course it's really vast out, and after a set amount of time it's paced to where you get these things that are complex, and it's not complex in the beginning. That's also a great example of tight gameplay. Thank you guys so much. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to check out my channel playlist for individual tutorials on logic, sculpting, animation, music, and more. I have other tips and tricks also, such as these, and tutorials on how to make levels. Just ask in the comment section, and give other people your ideas on how to make levels in the comment section also, because there's a lot more that I can learn as well. Peace out, guys, and thank you so much for watching.